Ready? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for coming tonight. When we first started, we thought it was going to be a very light crowd, but this is good that it's filling in here now. Thank you for coming. Before we get started, I go over a couple of housekeeping. The bathrooms are out in the hallway, and the emergency exits are at the back and on the sides. Before we get going here too much, I would really like to thank the kitchen staff. Lori, Bridget, and Laurette, you did a wonderful job. Thank you very much. Bridget, really like to thank you because she's donated all the food. Speaking of food, there is going to be a ton of leftover pierogies. They are going to package them up into containers, and for a donation, you can take some pierogies home with you. So, and they are good pierogies, so go get yourself some pierogies. I'd like to thank Keith Church for donating all the kitchenware from his catering company. He donated everything so that they could actually cook the meal tonight. And I'd like to thank Kevin for helping set up tonight. Thank you again. Our first speaker tonight, I've known for many years, and he has been involved in the conservative movement here for quite a while. At this time, I'd like to welcome up Mr. Zayn. Just about did it again because I was thinking about it. Mr. Zayn Novak.
Thank you. Thank you, Shane. Are you able to hear me? Okay, good. So, yes, I'm Zayn Novak. I haven't been involved in politics as long as Shane may lead you to believe, but I started to become involved when I lived in Calgary, and I was very involved in the nonprofit community, and that took me into contact with all three levels of government, and that sickened me. I was mortified at the lack of efficiency, the corruption, it has nothing to do with being a meritocracy, and we, the taxpayer, pay for it. And so that prompted me to do one of the more foolish things I've ever done in my life, and I ran to be mayor of Calgary in 2021, the worst campaign period you could ever try to do. You had COVID lockdown, you had a federal election, we had 27 mayoral candidates. But I always say this about politics. Once you get involved, it's like Christmas. If you were raised as a little kid and you believed in Santa, you believed in Christmas, you had all that passion for it, and then one day you realize that Santa's not real, you can never, ever, ever, ever go back to believing that Santa's real. Well, when you get involved in politics and you realize that we're not in a good system, there will never be another moment in your life, although maybe we could work towards that you will believe that the system we're in has our back or is for our benefit or for our protection, safety, or prosperity. So that really motivated me to get involved. And then through the course things, I helped to lead the vote against Jason Kenney, which I think is very important. I think it set the platform for us to be here today. And I see that unsavory character rearing his ugly head in politics again, trying to stay relevant. And you see that so much in politics. And so when we come to this, and we come to the fact that we want an independent Alberta, there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, I could be here for 3 hours listing how Canada has become a failed state. And it breaks my heart to say that because, I was born in Lloydminster. I grew up in Saskatchewan. I moved to Alberta. I've had the privilege of living in other countries, doing business in other countries, visiting other countries. I was always so proud to be a Canadian and come back to Canada. But when Trudeau got in the second time, it broke my heart. I was done. I realized that there was no coming back to a good version of Canada. For many, many years, I felt that we should be separate. The West was not recognized. Like I said, I can go through all the things. We could talk about how our GDP is the lowest of the G20, basically. If all of those groups were to be formed now, we wouldn't even qualify to be in them. We can talk about our unemployment rates. We can talk about our how impossible it is to export our goods, to control our future, to control our resources. We can talk about the transfer payments and, $700 billion that's gone in transfer payments. We can talk about the fact we got 90 million back since 1957. The inequity is almost indescribable, and I can depress everybody in this room by talking about it. But let's instead talk about what happens when we separate. Let's talk about because we have, if anybody here remembers a gentleman named Gandhi, he fought for India, right? And he famously said this. He says, when you are fighting for a cause, certain things are going to happen. Number one, they're going to ignore you and hope you go away. Number two, they're going to mock you, ridicule you. And if you keep fighting for what you believe, they're going to turn vicious and violent, and they're going to attack you. And it's up to you to make the fourth thing happen. And the fourth thing is when you persevere and you win. And I think we can see those things playing out in our arena right now here in Alberta and in the West. We've never had a break in the West. It's never been fair. And everybody goes, the system's broken, the system's broken. The system is not broken. The system is working exactly the way it was designed. Now, we're going to have a Q&A period after this, so I'm going to keep my speech as brief as I can. Everybody knows I'll use 1,000 words when one would suffice. But I want you to think about questions to ask us after this. Talk about the disparity. Talk about the fact that it is impossible for us to vote our way into a better version of Canada because the last federal election, our polls closed at 8 o'clock in Alberta. The election was called at 8:09. It wouldn't have mattered what we voted. It doesn't make a difference. And even if we would have got a conservative leader in, it would just slow the process down minusculely. It's death by 1,000 cuts. We have no say in the Supreme Court. We have not enough in the entire West to have a say in federal ridings. We have almost no seats in the Senate. We have twice the population of the Maritimes. They've got like 34 senators. We've got a population double that with 6 senators that are all liberally appointed. This system is working exactly the way it was designed to work. Do you know that the only 2 provinces who had no ability or right to negotiate their way into Canada were Alberta and Saskatchewan? We're basically annexed. Everybody else, you look what Newfoundland could be like 1949, and they negotiate their way in with what they would get and what they would receive. We didn't. In fact, our first premier was appointed by a Liberal federal government. We didn't get to vote on our first premier. These are all the histories of, and this goes on and on and on. Actually, Shane, who introduced me, he has an amazing timeline that he talks from 1905 up to present day, all of the things that were stacked against us that are not in our favor and we can't win. But in your questions, Ask questions about CPP. Ask questions about the disparity. Ask questions about whether we'll be landlocked or not. Ask questions about our trade partners. Ask questions about how our national forests are managed. Ask questions about our military bases in Alberta and how they're managed. Be happy to talk on all these topics afterwards because they're important, because they're actually all positives. We get all this negative hubris and we think it's all stacked against us. Oh, we don't control the national parks. Not true. Oh, we don't control Suffield or Wainwright or Cold Lake Four-Wing. That's not true. We do. All these things are leverage points for us. Love to talk about our pension plan and how we've been abused by that, or the fact that we've been overpaying in employment insurance forever. All these things of disparity would be prosperity that comes back to us. Our educational system, the fact that if you're in Quebec and you go to a trade school, your wage is paid the whole way through it. If you have a kid here going to trade school for HVAC or welding or pipe fitting or cooking or whatever, no, you gotta go on unemployment. Like, you're not paid for it. They are there with our transfer money. There's all these different things that are stacked against us, and we could change that. We can talk about the fact that Alberta is the only piece of land in North America where the provincial, or in the States would be the state government, controls 83% of the mineral rights. 83% of the land in Alberta, the mineral rights are controlled by the Alberta government. That's why our transfer payments are so high, because under Harper and Kenny, when Harper was in, they drafted a new transfer payment, equalization payment, that gave 50% of our resource royalties to Ottawa. And they did that trying to get enough Eastern votes to stay in, because we don't have enough Western votes if every man, woman, child, and everybody voted. So these are the compromises that happen, and it's at our expense. Everybody thinks we're, a bunch of rich Westerners. Well, no, we're actually not, because other provinces like Saskatchewan, it's only about 20% of mineral rights are owned by the province. Everything else is making individuals millionaires. There was a poll done recently in Quebec, and 80% of the poll respondents, the way it's painted over there, believe that they subsidize Alberta. That is how much the narrative is against us. We have been in an abusive relationship since 1905. And there's only two ways to leave an abusive relationship. You either leave or you die. I want to leave. I don't want to die. I want a future for my children, my grandchildren, if I have them. Oh, that's my 10 minutes, people. I'll talk just for a minute or so until Shane throws something at me. It's really important to realize all the positives that we have in our future. You can look at all the major oil-producing companies in the countries in the Middle East, and they have like no income tax, and they have one resource: oil and sand. Think of the resources we have here. We have so many resources we haven't even exploited. We have uranium in this province too. We haven't even looked at it. Our oil, our gas, our forestry, our agriculture, our fresh water, our tourism, mineral deposits, lithium deposits. We have all these things here. We would be in the top 10 for gross domestic product right now if we were an individual country. And that is before we even start to actually get to Tidewater and really move our product and deal with not just the US, but Brentwood, all of the other oil countries that need oil that actually pay more than what we get for selling to the US. Not that I'm against the US, but we need more trade partners. We have all of these opportunities ahead of us. But if we do not act on this now, there will never be another opportunity for us to do this. We have one window, and it's now. So we need to not be distracted by all the things that are occurring, all the hatred that's flung towards us. I'm sure everybody is thinking about the court injunction and all of that. There was announcements today. Do not let that distract you. Do not let that dissuade you. Do not let that discourage you. It's like Gandhi said, you know, they're going to fight us. They're going to fight us in the media. They're going to fight us because they know that without us, Canada will not stand. They never hated Quebec. When Quebec tried to leave, what did they do? They tried to make nice. They put full newspaper ads. We love you. We love you. What are they doing to us? They're name-calling us. They're threatening us. They're attacking us in the courts, in the newspaper, in the media. Just proves that we're right. And I think our next individual speaking is Mr. Corey Morgan. Now, this is a man who has forgotten more than I know, so he's going to have some great information for you, and he's going to be fantastic in the Q&A afterwards. Corey, come on down.
Thanks, Steve. So anything happening in the news today? So Wednesdays are the day I'm in the newsroom. I spend the day, I do a few shows, I write a couple columns, I get my stuff done. I thought, okay, I made it accomplished, I'm set for the week. And then I'm driving home and I turn on the radio. Oh yeah, a court ruling came in. So, okay, I missed the top story of the day. But it's really changed everything. It's kind of, you know, I might as well start with that. Let's talk about that. That's what's on top of things right now. People saying, well, what do I do now? Well, you do the exact same thing you were doing yesterday. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. We kind of expected this might come. I still like to maintain a little bit of optimism, thinking maybe it was a judge with some sense who would say that a minority group can't stop a democratic exercise from happening. But I, as many times in my life, have found myself disappointed by our establishment. But I'll lay out what this does mean. Keith Wilson responded very quickly to it, and he's always great for that sort of thing, and reminding people where that right is, where a referendum comes from. And it's from the Supreme Court reference case in 1998. This overrides this court right now. It is the right of the province to hold a referendum on independence, as long as it's a clear question, and then the process continues. The only thing that got shut down was the ability to petition to get this referendum. So now it's on Premier Smith's lap. I think she would have much preferred that the court had ruled and got it out of her hands to say, look, the petitioners did it, we're going to hold it, we're going to have it done. Hey, I'm not supporting independence, it's an initiative, it's what citizens can do. She lost that option today. I think if anybody who was bummed with the court ruling today more than anyone else, it's actually Premier Smith. Because now she's got two decisions she can make. And I think she's going to make the right one. I still keep maintaining that optimism. I'm dogged about it, but if only for her own political skin, because you got to look at how things are sitting. 7,000 people signed up, petitioned, went out in the cold, got sworn at, got the finger given to them, got cigarettes butted in their faces, had cars swerve at them. Do you think those people are going to throw their hands up, say, oh, the court said I couldn't do it, I give up, I'll just go home? No, they aren't. And as I said on X, and I know the Premier occasionally looks at my account, you can have those 7,000 people campaigning for a yes vote all summer, or you can have those 7,000 people campaigning for a leadership race this fall. Which one do you want them doing? The memory of Jason Kenney isn't that far back. When you have ignored your membership, they will turn on you. That's the nature of conservatives. It's one of our self-destructive natures. I still think it's one of our better natures. She knows that. And I don't expect her to come out and support a yes vote. Fine. I mean, it'd be great if she did, but I don't expect it. But I do think and expect, I mean, she said she's going to go to appeal with this. I think they needed that immediate answer. It's not like the courts gave warning that this was going to come out. They don't have the communications sorted out and everything else. I suspect, I'm just going to guess, something next week's going to come along. If I were a comms person, I'd already be writing it saying, look, we tried to follow these things, but the will of Albertans is just so important. And it would be so disrespectful to Thomas Lukasik not to go this fall and put it to Albertans and say, do you want to leave? Yeah, she can use that. She could say 700,000 people want this put to the question. It's not taking one side or the other. It's saying the only way to settle this is going to be in a referendum, and that's the truth. We can't have this hanging over our heads for years, and it will be. The independence movement isn't going away if we don't get a referendum. it's only going to grow, and it's going to grow frustrated. And then we could really have some serious problems. You can't cork a bottle like that. And she knows that. So this referendum's coming. Our plan is the same now as it was before. And then some people saying, well, was my time petitioning wasted? Not a bit. Not a bit. It was brilliant. And for one, it gave her the political and moral authority to call that referendum for this fall, because she could say, even if it hasn't gone through Elections Alberta, she's seen what happened and knows that people have expressed themselves well and beyond where the bar was. And what an exercise for all of us to network, to unify, to find each other, to get out there, to meet the public, to have those flags on the sides of the roads, to have these events. The petitioning phase was such a brilliant, wonderful, even if unintentional, first step in a campaign to a full winning vote this fall. What other way to get 7,000 people to sign up and say, I want to take some time, my own time, and get out and make this happen? What a base. Entire elections have been won and lost with much smaller volunteer bases than that. Much smaller and less dedicated. And that base is still there, and that base is still eager. The will is still there. So we carry on like we are. But now we do have to carry the stick a bit. I don't want to have to eat my words. Perhaps Premier Smith, foolishly, I was on the board when she crossed the floor some years ago. I do think highly of Danielle, and I mostly support her, but I'm as aware of anybody that she can make some pretty piss poor decisions on the occasional time, and big ones. So we have to encourage her. One of the things I think that was wise that was put out was saying, now is the time to buy your membership for the UCP. And I'm not saying it's time to light the torch and get the pitchfork yet, but they're watching those numbers. And let's see those membership numbers grow, because they know exactly why it's growing. And it just is that kind of silent reminder in the background that you've got maybe a week before the real campaign to start taking over constituency associations and forcing a leadership campaign is going to start. And that happened once before. Everybody remembers how to do it. The rule book's been set. So it's not like they have to reinvent the wheel. I just don't think it'll come to that. I hope not. So we carry on, though, under the assumption we're going to campaign all summer and into this fall to win a yes vote. Because we aren't there yet anyway. If a vote were held tomorrow, I don't think we'd win it. I'd like to be wrong, but I don't think so. Not yet. We have a massive amount of undecided people. Support is stronger than it's ever been before. But we still have a large chunk of people who are on the fence, which is brilliant. It isn't like the majority is totally against. We've got that mushy middle that we have to win, and it's winnable. But it's going to be the hardest campaign we've ever done. We're just seeing the first signs. If they were that confident that they would win, they would let this referendum go. If I was so confident that 80% of people would vote on something I support and I just want to get it out of the way, I said, well, let's get the question out there. Let's get it done. And then they'll shut up for a few years. But instead, they're fighting, trying to keep us from even having the ability to have a referendum. They're scared. They know the potential's there if we can get it together and campaign. They know what's happening. And we saw some of the dirty tricks we're going to have to deal with. And that wasn't even with the independence movement, but showing that broken legacy media we have. If some saw that story with Francis Widdowson and that group, and I can't imagine how much money was spent on that, where they had an ambush interview, this setup with Francis Widdowson. They flew her to a location. They had a big studio. They had like 10 people working in there. And it turned out it was an ambush thing for some comedy show that CBC, our tax dollars, funded. And then when Widdowson saw through it, they picked the wrong old gal to piss around with. She didn't walk out the door. She picked up her own phone and interviewed them. If you haven't seen that video, it's brilliant, because that guy is looking so scared and so awkward. He's never had anybody turn the camera back at the asshole, and he deserved it. But they went after Lindsay Shepherd too. And I saw that studio. I saw the size of it. I saw the cameras. I saw the staff. And I was crushed with studio envy. I work at the Western Standard. Our studio is 20 by 10. I got one producer in there, and I got to book my own guests. But it shows the resources that the establishment has, that legacy media has. They can spend, it must be hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, on a joke side show like that. While we're, and I like to say successfully, but scrounging up $10 a month subscriptions so people support us. So the enemy is going to have $1.5 billion a year to work on through CBC and other transfers. We're working face-to-face through ourselves. And this is how we beat it, though. This is how we beat it. They can't get between you and me here tonight. They can't get between you guys at your tables tonight. This kind of networking, this kind of getting together, that's why I really appreciate people coming out. These meetings aren't just us getting together to drink each other's bathwater. This is keeping a campaign active and moving and networking and learning from each other so we can find out how best to reach that massive amount of undecided people who are sitting out there. We got 5.5 months and they're going to go fast. So the Q&A, and that's where I'm going to leave off because that's just the most important part of these things Chris have been putting together. The Q&A is so fantastic because I learned things. People ask questions I never thought of. I like to think you guys learn things as we answer. Boy, we got a great panel of bright experts up here, and I'll bring one up right away now with Tanya Clemens, I believe, is up next. And I'm certain you're familiar with her from the agricultural community and an outspoken advocate for freedom and independence in general. So I'll hand it off, and I look forward to the Q&A, guys. Thanks. There you go, Tanya.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming. It's been a bit of a day. So before I begin tonight, I guess I want to acknowledge what's happened today, or just one of the many things that's happened today. But the big thing, I know a lot of Albertans saw the recent court ruling on the independence petition, and Corey was talking about that too. And kind of the first instinct is to feel a bit discouraged. Another wall, another blockade. And at first glance, it looked like it was just another attempt by ordinary people in this province to start a democratic discussion and run into a wall. And I understand that reaction, but over the last couple of hours, I've taken the time to listen carefully to Premier Daniel Smith's response. And what stood out to me wasn't frustration or panic, it was clarity and it was calm. And I fully believe this conversation is going to continue and that there will be a legitimate referendum. And ultimately, the direct voice of Albertans will be heard. I also think it's important to say something that not everyone will agree with, but over the past year, I've watched people inside this movement spend a lot of time attacking Premier Daniel Smith, questioning her, pushing her, even treating her like an obstacle. And I think that's a mistake, because whether people agree with her approach or not, she is operating in the one place where this conversation can actually move forward in a way that ordinary Albertans can trust. And what her statement today reinforced is that while courts can weigh in on the process, they don't eliminate the conversation. And they don't erase the fact that hundreds of thousands of Albertans have already engaged with this question. And they don't remove the democratic path forward. If anything, they clarify it, and they clarify the need for it. Because what this ruling really did is bring this back to where it belongs. Where this conversation moves forward, it will happen through a referendum. It will happen through a lawful process, and that means the future of this province will not be decided in a courtroom. It will be decided by Albertans. And that's why this matters, because this conversation is not just a theoretical conversation. When that moment comes, when you're handed a ballot on referendum day and asked to decide, then each of us has a responsibility to understand what exactly we're being asked. So I'm not here tonight as a politician or economist or constitutional lawyer. I'm here as a farmer, a teacher, a mom, and as someone who cares deeply about what kind of future we're building in this province. When I'm out filling the cedar or at harvest out in the combine, there are moments where everything just feels very, very simple. I quite love being removed from the rest of the world and out on my farm. I'm just focused on the work, the land, the weather, and the people around me. I'm not thinking about Ottawa or policy or jurisdiction, government overreach. I'm just thinking about doing my job well and building something that lasts. And I think that sense of building something real, something earned, is something that a lot of people in this province really understand. And when I step back and I look at where we are today, I've had to start asking myself some important questions. Not political ones, but practical ones, because these questions are actually affecting how people live. So I have 5 questions I'd like to go through with you that I think every Albertan should be asking themselves right now. The first question is whether we are truly better off than we were a generation ago. Not in just a general sense, but day-to-day life. Can your families afford homes? Can your young families afford homes the way that they used to? I know, I can't even remember who spoke to the statistic about it recently, but now the average age of owning your first home is 44 years old. 20 years ago, that was 24 years old. So in that last 20 years, you would have been able to buy a house and have it paid off by the time kids now will be able to actually purchase their first house. That's kind of wild. The second question is, who actually makes the decisions that shape life here? And who should be making those decisions? Because when you look closely, many of the biggest decisions affecting Albertans don't happen in Alberta. They're not made here. They happen somewhere else. Policies around energy, pipelines, emissions, and regulation are developed at the federal level. And when they show up here, it shows up in very, very real ways. They affect whether projects go ahead or don't, whether investment comes here or goes somewhere else, and ultimately what it costs to live and work in this province. Even when Albertans vote one way provincially, those decisions can still be overridden, and they often are. And that's just the structure that we're operating within, and it has real consequences for our daily lives. The third question is financial, and it's one that becomes difficult to ignore once you really look at it. If we keep giving more than we receive, how long is that actually sustainable? Because since 1961, Alberta has sent over $800 billion more to Ottawa than we've received back. That's roughly now about $28 billion that leave this province every year that we get no services back for in return. And if you average that out per Albertan, that's about $6,000. Or for the average family of 4, that's $24,000. Those numbers are so large that they actually stop feeling real. So I try to think about it in a way that makes it feel a little bit more tangible. Imagine that instead of moving through government systems, all of that money was physically collected from Albertans. So one day, a semi-truck pulls up to your house, and it's there to ask you for your share of the overpayment that we give to Ottawa. Your share is $6,000. So you go to your stash of cash and you count out $320 bills. And then your spouse has to do the same thing. And then your 2 children at home have to do the same thing. And then they go to your neighbors and every single house in your community until they've reached all the way across Alberta, collecting their $20 bills of Albertans' money and filling their shipping containers. Now, every 2 shipping containers that they fill is $1 billion. So picture now our overpayment is 56 of those semi-truck trailers of Albertans' $20 bills leaving Alberta, headed to Ottawa. But actually, half of them, 28 of those shipping containers, about $14 billion, is actually going straight to Quebec. So at some point, this has to stop being so abstract and start becoming something that people feel. That is a boatload of money. The fourth question is one I often hear, and it is, why can't we just fix this within Canada? And I think that's a fair question, and I understand the heart and the patriotism behind that. But to answer it honestly, you have to look at what's already been tried. And for 120 years, we have tried. From the very beginning, Alberta didn't enter Confederation on equal footing. In fact, we didn't even get to choose or negotiate our way in. We were just told we were in. In the early 1900s, it was made clear that the wealth of the prairies was going to fund and support the development in Eastern Canada. And it took until 1930 for Alberta to even gain control of its own natural resources. Then in 1947, we had the oil discovery in Leduc, which began generating some real wealth for our province. And from that point forward, the relationship with Ottawa shifted, because once Alberta became economically significant, there was a growing interest in controlling and redistributing that wealth. By the 1980s, that tension became impossible to ignore with the National Energy Program, which drove investment out of this province, canceled projects, and affected families across Alberta. And what's important about that period is that it wasn't described as an unintended consequence. It was described as intentional policy. They had seen Alberta rising. We were becoming the economic powerhouse of the country, and they deliberately cut us down. After that, there were attempts to address these imbalances. We had the Meech Lake and Charlottetown Accords, both efforts to renegotiate how the country functioned and to open up the Constitution, but both failed. And the reason why they failed matters, because for Albertans to open up the Constitution requires surpassing 4 insurpassable hurdles. The first one is you need to have 7 out of 10 provinces representing 50% of the population in agreement. So unless you get Quebec or Ontario, who have 60% of the population together, that's never going to happen. So you need one of them on board. The second hurdle is that you need to have a majority vote in the House of Commons. Pretty unlikely that you're going to pass that one. But if you did, the third hurdle is that you need to then have a majority vote in the Senate. And even by some miracle, if you pass those 3 hurdles, the fourth one is impossible because Quebec basically has a de facto veto vote. So we cannot open up the Constitution and make the structural change that we so want. Continuing on the timeline, in the 1990s, we had the Reform Party, which emerged again out of Western frustration with the goal of fixing the system from within. Ottawa basically ignored that. The rest of Canada basically ignored it. And decades later, many of the same concerns still remain. In 2001, we had the firewall letter. That was like with Stephen Harper and Ted Morton and a bunch of them that put out this letter and outlined the specific ways that Alberta could take more control of its own affairs. And in 2001, remember, they advocated for more control of pensions, policing, and taxation. Those are still the exact same things that we're fighting for 25 years later. More recently, they had the Fair Deal panel. And again, they asked for fairness and Ottawa ignored them. And then in 2021, we had the Equalization referendum, where 62% of Albertans voted in favor of ending equalization, which requires opening up the Constitution, which Jason Kenney would have known ahead of time. And look where that went. Nowhere, because we can't do it. We can't open up the Constitution. So when people ask, why not just fix this within? I think the honest answer is that Alberta has been trying to do exactly that for a very, very long time. And that brings me to the fifth question, which is the one I've spent the most time thinking about. What happens if we do nothing? Because doing nothing feels like the safer option. Excuse me. But it isn't neutral. The country is changing. We don't have clear constitutional protection for property rights. There are ongoing debates around freedom of expression and where those lines are drawn. Decision-making continues to become more centralized in a country that is incredibly diverse in how people live and work. And none of this happens overnight. It happens gradually until one day things feel very, very different from the Canada that we idealized or that we grew up in. And at some point you have to ask yourself, which carries more risk? Continuing down a path that you have very little control over, or taking responsibility for shaping something closer to home? For me, it comes down simply to the certainty of where Canada is headed is far, far scarier than any uncertainty of forming a new nation. And that's what this comes down to. Not anger, not frustration, but responsibility. Apologies. Responsibility and probably a whole lot of courage. Responsibility for what kind of province we leave to the next generation. Responsibility for whether opportunity still exists here in a meaningful way, and responsibility for whether the things that built this place can still be built again. Because when a referendum comes, oh, thank you, that's so sweet. There will be a moment where you walk into a polling station and you're handed a ballot. Sorry. Thank you. And even when I talk about this, I talk about it a lot too, picturing referendum day, and I get goosebumps on my cheek, picturing the significance and the weight and the emotion that we will feel that day. Because at first I think it will feel simple. You'll just have a piece of paper, a question, and a box to check. But it's not simple, because everything we've talked about tonight, the history, the decades and decades of effort, the thousands and thousands of people who have put in that effort, the people who built lives here, over and over again, and people trying to make this work, all of that comes down to that one moment and that one piece of paper. Isn't that kind of wild? And I think when that day comes, it deserves more than just a quick decision. It deserves a pause, a real pause, long enough to understand what you're part of, because moments like that don't come around very often. Like Corey said, or me with Zayn, sorry, this is probably our only chance at answering this question. Most generations don't get asked a question like this at all. And so when I picture that moment in that ballot box, I don't think about politics or arguments or anything. I think about what kind of life is actually possible here I will think about whether the next generation will have the same chance to build something meaningful, to work hard and to see it pay off, to raise a family in a place that feels stable, predictable, and free. I'll think a lot about my children. And I think about the responsibility that we carry in that moment. Because whatever direction Alberta takes, it will be because people made that choice deliberately, not by default or drifting, but by deciding with intention. So when that day comes and you have that ballot in your hand on Independence Referendum Day, take the time to understand what's in front of you. Think about your family, think about your future, and may Alberta be forever strong and free. Thank you. And then I guess I get to do the introduction for the last speaker, who doesn't really need an introduction because he's the warrior of freedom and a freedom fighter at heart and loves Alberta more than almost anyone I've ever met. So Chris Scott, please.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think the other speakers did a fine job of kind of saying everything, so I guess good night. Well, thank you all for being here. It's absolutely wonderful. I wonder if I can stand in front of this. Is that okay on the screen, Bonnie? Is it working?
Yeah, we'll take a step that way.
That way? Can you see me? Okay. How's that? It's really, really nice to be able to do this. It's a blessing to be able to come to rooms like this with Albertans who are concerned about their futures and talk about our future with them. For most of my adult life, I've felt like my role in politics, in democracy, was like nothing. I felt insignificant. I felt like my voice doesn't matter. As a Western Canadian, and I was born in British Columbia, by the way, I chose to become an Albertan. I've been Western Canadian all my life. As a Western Canadian, I felt that way. And I think most people do. Most Western Canadians feel like they don't have the voice in this democracy to be able to influence the outcome of their future. Would you agree with me with that? And you know, the election results and our federal legislation, it shows that. That's the proof in the pudding. Very often we're subjected to legislation that we don't, not only did we not vote for, but we are like completely opposed to, and then it is imposed on us. This happens all the time. And for the first time in my life, as I've been doing this, traveling around talking about Alberta, I feel like there's hope. I feel like what I have to say can make a difference. I feel like what you have to say can make a difference. And do you know why I feel like that now, whereas I didn't 6 years ago? Because what we're going to be asked, the question, allegedly, presumably, that's going to be put to Albertans in the fall, our voices matter. For the first time in Canadian history. This is an epic event. This is monumentous. This is perhaps the most important and critical question that you're going to answer in your political lives. This isn't another federal election. It's not a school board election. It's not we're not voting for a premier. We are voting for the opportunity to finally, for the first time, influence the outcome of our own future collectively. This is a very, very big deal, and it's not something to take lightly. So here we are, filling rooms, almost full. This is great. Talking to people who are concerned about the future, listening to the concerns people have about our future, specifically to do with Alberta sovereignty, Alberta independence. I'm really hoping that there's lots of people here that have concerns about what an independent Alberta will look like, what it means, how we get there. I hope there's people in this room that are completely opposed to it and will challenge my opinion that Alberta independence is necessary and inevitable. Now, the goal of Let's Talk Alberta is to have these open forum type debate, maybe debates, but conversations. We want to listen to what people are concerned about and talk to them about it. That's why it's called Let's Talk Alberta. Where our goal is to spend less time up here talking at you and more time hearing what you are concerned about, because we want to make sure that when we get to our alleged question in the fall, every single Albertan has had the opportunity to be listened to, first and foremost, and to have these conversations, and to feel like their voices matter for the first time in Canadian history. That's what Let's Talk Alberta is about. And we're not a big organization backed by anybody, certainly not backed by foreign money, although I am Russian, doesn't mean anything. We don't have big benefactors. Trump doesn't write us checks. None of that. We don't get grants from the government. We don't have a big war chest. And this brings up another point. This initiative, I thought of it while, I think, sitting on my couch, wondering how we're going to bring this conversation to people. And I just did it. I called Shane, I called Bonnie, I said, hey, guys, guess what we're going to do? And they're like, what are we going to do? And I said, we're going to go and we're going to do 200 events from in every corner of Alberta, and we're going to listen to people. And we're going to talk to them about Alberta independence and what their concerns are. And they said, okay. So then with the limited resources we had, we kind of just started booking halls and paying for it. And buying some pieces of equipment so that you can hear what we're saying, and so that the folks on the internet can hear what we're saying. We did it of our own accord, not being told by anyone else to do, not being coached or guided by anyone else, but because this is what we believe in. And I mention this because today I had the sad encounter where somebody alleged that perhaps I'm doing this for my own benefit. And to the people that may believe that, I have one piece of advice. If you don't believe by now that I am committed to making Alberta the best, freest, and most prosperous place on the planet, if you don't believe that my intentions are true and righteous by doing this, do not donate to Let's Talk Alberta. Don't give me or us a penny. Do not. There are plenty of Albertans who have watched for 6 years what me and some of my friends have done and what we've sacrificed to pursue freedom and prosperity through independence. They know and they believe that we're doing the right thing. We've earned the trust of Albertans, and those Albertans, they're happy to support these initiatives. For those of you who are on that side, who I've earned your trust, please donate, and donate often. And I don't say that because I want a new car. I drive a 2018 minivan, although I love it. It's really great. We need to be able to continue to do this. And the only way we can do it is with your help. These events, this one, what a blessing that someone stepped up and donated all the pierogies, all the food. I didn't have to lift a finger to cook. Can you imagine how nice that was for me? Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. But these events, you know, they run in the neighborhood of a couple $1,000 a piece, just because that's what it is. I mean, look at our gas prices. We drive 300 or 400 K sometimes to go somewhere. We're driving to Indian cabins, which is like, how far is that, Shane? It's like 800 kilometers or 900?
13 hours.
Okay, so it's like 13 hours of driving, but we're going to do it. Why? Because every single Albertan needs to have the opportunity to be listened to. Not talked to, listened to. I want to hear from the people in Indian cabins and Lloydminster and Coots and Banff and Jasper. I want to hear what it is about Alberta's sovereignty. What is it about our opportunity to start making our own decisions and influencing our own laws? What is it about that that you find unattractive? I want to hear that. That's so important. And it costs money. And again, if you don't believe that that's what I want to do, if you don't believe that that's what we want to do, don't give us your money. If you do believe that, please do. Now that the money gross part is out of the way, I want to just take a minute to make sure we all really understand the opportunity that's before us. Do you know what a blessing it is to have the opportunity to live in a country like Canada, where we can bring people with us for a cause. We can advocate for it. And then we can, through democratic means, express the will of the people, even to accomplish something so critical as leaving Canada. Do you know what blessing that is? If you're a history buff at all, or even if you paid attention to history in high school, you know that when people got the opportunity eventually to answer a question, such as the one we're going to presumably be asked in October, they bled and died. Sometimes they fought wars that lasted hundreds of years to get this opportunity. The United States, the greatest experiment in freedom the world has ever seen, has been free and maintained that freedom, although not perfect. They're not perfect, but they have maintained that freedom this year for 250 years. And they had to fight a bloody war to do it. What do you have to do to gain true freedom? You have to take a pen and make a mark on a piece of paper. More importantly, you have to educate yourself. You have to know what this conversation is about. You have to understand the consequence, the implications. You have to be able to explain and express these things to those around you that don't come to these meetings, who cannot be lured into rooms with pierogies. This is what you have to do. This is your fight. Your fight comes from your time and having conversations with those around you. And you will get the opportunity to do what others have had to fight for decades to have. Do you feel that? Do you understand what that is? Do you realize the blessing that's before us? I sure hope you do, because I do. And every time I stand in front of a crowd and I talk about this, it hits me harder and harder and harder. And it makes me want to work more, do more meetings, talk to more Albertans, listen to more concerns, and share my perspective with them so that they can come with me to the greatest opportunity this country has ever seen. Did you know that this has never happened in Canada? Canada's inception was a business deal between the Crown and the people that the Crown rewarded in Laurentian, Canada, but it wasn't Laurentian because it wasn't Laurier yet, but you get the picture. It wasn't a group of people like us coming together and saying, hey, we're going to self-govern. We're going to create this document. We're going to outline how our government may govern. We're going to outline how our laws work, how our government works. We didn't do that. Somebody else did it in a foreign land. And they passed a document in their legislature and then imposed it on Canada, the Dominion of Canada. That's how we were created. And if you wonder why does it seem like the system is designed to keep you subjugated, to keep you a subject instead of a free citizen? That's why. Because it was a sovereign who imposed their will, their methods of control, peace, order, and good government on us collectively. That's the difference between what the United States has and other countries that have declared independence and what Canada has. When a group of people fight for something and they build that thing and they come together and they outline, they tell, hey, you want to govern us? You need our consent first because we're free, sovereign individuals. We get our rights from God, not from government. And if you want to have any say in how our rights may from time to time be interfered with for the greater good of society, we're going to tell you how you can do it. That's what it means to have a constitution by the people. And that's the opportunity we have. I care about paying less taxes, but I didn't care enough to do this. I paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably millions of dollars in taxes over my lifetime. It didn't motivate me to do this. I've watched as the federal government implements legislation that kneecaps my industry and forces me to eat Mr. Noodles, although they're good sometimes, instead of my regular nice meals because I'm broke, because I'm not working, because we can't build pipelines and we can't get things done. But I didn't do this. I've had the government put a chain and a lock around the doors of my business, the method by which I fed my children and paid my mortgage. I've watched that happen, and I didn't do this right away. It wasn't until I realized why we feel the way we do in Alberta that it motivated me to do something about it. Because this isn't about money. It's not about who the prime minister is. This is about, for the first time in history, Alberta being able to control their destiny the way that God intended us to. We were never intended to be subjugated by people who live thousands of kilometers away and don't suffer the consequences of the legislation that they impose on us. That was never the way it was meant to be. It might have been okay in 1867 because we were busy surviving. We didn't have time to do this. We were fighting harsh prairie winters and chopping wood all summer so that we didn't die over the winter. And some did die, many died. We weren't concerned about politics or what was going on or what our Constitution looked like. We were only concerned that the king wasn't taxing us and we felt like we were kind of represented. Things have changed. Alberta has grown up. We are not an infantile region or a colony. We are a strong, diverse, educated, tenacious, hardworking people with rights that come from God, not from man, and it's time we start acting like it. It's time we started to take control of our future. And the way we do it is by talking to each other. Shedding this idea that talking about religion and politics is taboo. Oh, we don't want to ruffle anyone's feathers because what if they don't agree with us politically? I don't care. If you're offended with my political views, I will offend you, and then I will talk to you about why it offends you. If you're offended that I say Christ is king, I will offend you. And then I'm happy to explain to you why I say Christ is king. Do you understand what I'm saying? We have to start being bold. That's what a sovereign people do. We're bold. We don't slouch away from conflict when it shows up. We meet it head on. We talk to those people. We reach some sort of a conclusion or a compromise, and then we go there together. That's what Let's Talk Alberta advocates for. You will definitely hear speakers for Let's Talk Alberta sharing their opinions that we want an independent Alberta. You will. You'll hear some speakers like my friend Benoit Trudeau saying, hey, I'm not a separatist. I don't believe we need to be independent. We just need to be sovereign. He can speak. I'll invite Dwayne Bratt and Jason Kenney to come speak to you and make the case for Alberta remaining subjugated. They won't do it. But my point is that Let's Talk Alberta is about just that, talking about these things. The most important questions probably in our lifetime. Short of like, will you marry me? I mean, that's pretty important too. Anyway, in the spirit of that, I'm going to wrap this up by giving you guys some really, really good news. You're going to get a 10-minute break. You're going to be able to get up, stretch your legs, talk amongst yourselves, maybe talk about some of the things you've heard. Prepare some questions, prepare some concerns that you want to talk with us about, and then we're going to reconvene for a Q&A, and I want to hear what you have to say. Specifically, if you're here and you're opposed to what I'm saying, I want to hear from you first. You will go to the front of the line. Be bold, no matter what your opinion is. Be bold, and let's talk about it together. Thank you very much.
occurs. So what I would ask everybody to do is go to letstalkalberta.com or freedomcalendar.net or the Whistle Stop Cafe's Facebook page, and you will find all the posters of upcoming events as we get them booked and put in there. I would ask you to grab them, share them to people that you know in those areas, and ask them to hand it out to a few people. It's the old shampoo commercial from the 1970s. You tell two friends, they'll tell two friends, and so on, and so on, and so on. And that is the way we're going to have to spread the news to everybody. So without further ado, let's get the speakers up here, and we will get started with the Q&A. Yeah, and Chris is right there. They're coming. Are you got the chairs in focus? Okay. Okay, I will ask Bonnie if she'll do that. Oh, and the other thing while they're coming up to the front there is remember that there is a ton of pierogies over there, and for a donation you can take some home. They're sitting over on the table over there. Please take them home so that there's not any left over.
Is this thing on? Does this work? Is it an actual thing?
There she is.
Okay, so folks, if you have any questions, any concerns, opposing viewpoints, we're more than happy to hear it and talk about it. But before we do, there's something I really should have talked about before. This is really important. Have you noticed that there's a lot of people walking around with blue sweaters, blue hats, the stuff like this? Have you seen that? Do you know why people are walking around with that stuff? Because they love buying overpriced Alberta merch from the lovely Jessica over there or any of the vendors, which is important. It does help us, put food on the table, of course. But more importantly, when we go to events and we see an absolute sea of blue and Alberta stuff that everyone's wearing, that really sends a message, and it's heartwarming to see. So please, buy Alberta merch, buy it often, and if you happen to find out anybody who's got a decent book on sovereignty, like maybe a sovereigntist handbook or something, let me know and I'll pick up a copy. Oh, Corey has one. Yeah, Corey's got some over here, I guess.
And then turn this one off when they're speaking.
So if you have a question, I guess just raise your hand and Shane will. Where is Shane?
Do we have another microphone?
Oh, Brad's got the mic.
I have to hold it though.
You have to hold it.
No, you can hang on to it as well.
We're both holding on.
Good.
We're both holding on. But I guess we got to turn it on. Is it working?
Yeah, good.
Okay. Why is it important to buy a UCP membership?
That's a really good question. The question is, why is it important to buy a UCP membership? The same reason it's important to buy an NDP membership or an Independence Party membership or any other membership for that matter. I didn't know until my early 40s that democracy actually goes on every day. I didn't know that. I thought it was every 4 years. We go somewhere, vote for somebody that we think might do something in the next 4 years, then do it all over again. That's not the truth. When you are a member of a political party, you actually go in and you have your voice is influential in party policy that directs the direction of the party, who the party leader is, all sorts of really important things that will shape the situation around the next election. I actually think that it's more important. It's probably more important to participate in those things so that the people that get elected have kind of a path that they have to walk on behalf of the members than it is even to vote every 4 years. And I'm not saying don't vote, definitely vote, but the reason why it's important is because democracy is actually like every day of the year. And if you don't participate as much as you can, then you're only going to get out of it what you put in.
And I think specifically right now, why the big push is on is the fact that we need to send a strong message to our current government that everybody who has worked so hard to get those 300,000 signatures, along with the people, those 300,000 that signed it, we want this referendum. And we are watching, and we are holding our party, the UCP that's in power, to account. And if they see all of a sudden 10, 20, 30, 40,000 memberships being bought, that is sending a message that all these ones who want a referendum question, our referendum question, we want it, and if they don't do it, they're going to answer to us.
I just want to know, how are we going to get the younger people out, because they work, they have kids on the spectrum. I try to get my daughter out and she goes, "Mom, I have zero capacity left." She said, "I've listened to things, but to get out is almost impossible for people." And I think, with all the pressure and stress of young people and trying to, just come home from work, make meals, get kids off to things like, what can we do? Because you see the mean age here is retirement, right? And we need the young people. Any suggestions?
Yeah, and I would say, first of all, don't be disheartened by when you look around the room and it's people our age or older. That's more of a cultural thing, I think. Like, we were raised before technology, before cell phones and social media, where you actually went and had town halls because that's where you met your community and discussed and made decisions. That was part of our culture growing up. But the generation below me and younger, they have never experienced that. So they're not used to coming to town halls and maybe not comfortable with that setting. But on social media, we're seeing some of the hugest engagement is in actually the 18 to 40-year-old males. Sorry, closer yet. 18 to 40-year-old males. So I've worked with like the comms team with APP and different groups. And yeah, the social media is really where you're getting the engagement and seeing that too. But lots of that will happen as well when you go home and you talk to your family members and you sit around the dinner table, you're camping on holidays and having those conversations. Like it really does spread the grassroots way. Someone want to add?
Sure. And I want to mention, Corey and I, we spoke at a SFA signing location in Bentley. And there were a ton of young people there standing in a lineup outside for hours wanting to sign. So young people are showing up when it's time to show up, but they don't always come to stuff like this. So yeah, like what Tanya said, don't be disheartened. They know that their future is at stake. They are showing up when it really matters. And we just have to make sure that we continue the conversation, talking with them and get them to those things when it's time.
I have to hold it, but hold
Okay.
it close to your mouth.
I have a quick question here. I've actually got several questions, but I'll just ask one here first. I don't know what the legal or the law is regarding our legacy media, but if Alberta was, let's just put it this way, when Alberta legally separates from Canada, are we going to be able to ban the legacy media so that we can get in proper media that will actually speak and talk to Albertans correctly? Because with the misinformation, disinformation, lies by omission, I am absolutely fed up with the mainstream media, and I don't watch it anymore.
Well, it wouldn't be right to ban because we can't pick and choose which is which and which turns into legacy media. As tempting as it is, I understand. What we do need to do is defund it, completely level the playing field. No outlet, independent or legacy, should get any tax dollars. Let them find their audiences and their viewers on their own and be accountable to them. And yes, a defund the CBC shirt, which is great. And it will evolve. I'm just going to give a quick story because I trust Albertans to get things right. I work for the Western Standard. When we were kind of getting things going and we were a little small and we were getting some good scoops, and actually we were really kind of beating the heck out of Jason Kenney, a note of a story came up about some guys meeting and Kenney meeting and cabinet ministers in a bar and everything. It sounded like a huge juicy scoop during COVID and everything. And we jumped on it and we published it without properly checking the facts. And it turned out to be BS. We ended up getting some legal notices very fast. We had to retract it, put out an apology and do some other things. And we lost a whole bunch of subscribers. Now, the good side of what I'm talking about with this story of losing the subscribers, now Derek wouldn't agree with that. They came back. We did better. But that was our readers, even if they were ticked with Kenney, saying, I don't like it when you feed me BS, and I'm going to stop reading your stuff. I'm going to stop subscribing to your stuff if you mislead us. They told us they're not going to take that crap from us. And Albertans will do that. If we can just leave media to be organic and for the outlets to grow, people will be responsible enough to hold the outlets accountable. But right now, the playing field isn't level. Legacy media is doing some terrible tricks. They're god-awful, and they're tax-funded. But the first thing is just get all government involvement out of media, period.
Okay.
Hey, my question has nothing to do with, well, I guess it does have to do with Alberta independence. Do you believe what happened with David Parker and the Centurion Project has harmed us?
It has done us no favors. It's very disappointing. The sad thing about it is, it's a very complex situation, and it should have never happened. I used to be, years ago, closely associated with Mr. Parker when it was the Take Back Alberta event, when we held and brought Kenney to count. In fact, for the last 2 or 3 months of that campaign, up until the May 18th or May, whatever it was, May 6th vote, I was actually the CEO of TBA. So I have a lot of personal, in the past, I want to emphasize in the past, connection with Mr. Parker. And yes, it has had a negative impact. And as Corey brought out, you know, the funded socialistic media will make every advantage and opportunity of that. It's what they'll attack us on anything, and I mean, that's just low-hanging fruit. So it's disappointing. And having run for a municipal position, that electoral list is a very serious offense to use that outside of the writ period and only for the campaign it was dropped for. So anybody that says, oh, it's just the white pages, no, it's far more serious than that. So yes, it is huge gravitas to it. It is going to be used against us left, right, and center. But I think someone on this panel mentioned a little earlier, if they thought they could easily beat us, they wouldn't be attacking us the way they are. So when they take things like this and it's front page news, it's in the news every day, they harp on it and they harp on it, it is because they are fearful of us. It's up to us to not let these things discourage us, to actually remind ourselves that we're winning, that they keep attacking. If we were losing, they wouldn't have done what they did with the court injunction, that Liberal judge. I'm assuming Liberal, most are appointed, 90+% are appointed Liberal judges. They wouldn't be making all the headline news out of this. They wouldn't be making all the headline news out of supposedly all the Indigenous individuals in this province don't want it, where in fact, that's not true. We just saw the polls that came out. They actually support us. So we cannot be discouraged when this happens. And the other thing I really want to emphasize, let's take the high road. We saw when the Forever Canada petition came out, we never attacked those canvassers. We never threatened them. We didn't do any of that. But that happened over 90 times with the Stay Free Alberta canvassers. They were harassed, attacked, in some cases violently. You know, that paints a very clear picture. And I would hope that we continue to fight this battle with dignity and with class and with honesty, because they can't take that away from us. It's up to us to not give that away.
I just want to follow up with a comment. When I first heard what happened with the Centurion project, I was pissed. About an hour went by, and then I calmed down and started mellowing out. And what it did to me is when I'm told I can't do something, guess what? It makes me go 10 times harder. And it did. I pushed this independence movement like you wouldn't believe. And well, it's thanks to my son, actually. He's the one who, I was always been a separatist, but he's the one who got me to go. So what it did is it pushed me harder. And I think it did that for a lot of people in this movement that really believe in it. It made us push harder. And I just want to continue to push. Thank you.
I just want to point out that we still don't know what happened. So, you know, don't judge before the information's out.
Okay. Are you all right with a structural type question about how Let's Talk Alberta is structured? It's not.
Sure.
Okay. Is Let's Talk Alberta a third-party advertiser? If not, what is it? Do you have a board? And what have you done to keep on side with Elections Alberta? That's from Dale Alton.
That's a very good question. So the question is the structure of Let's Talk Alberta. Right now, the structure of Let's Talk Alberta is a 5'10" short and fat Irishman. That's me. That is the structure. Let's Talk Alberta is operating as a sole proprietor right now because for some reason, the Alberta government has a backlog of 4 months to register a society. Isn't that interesting? So that's all done. It's all gone to registries and whatnot, but there's going to be a period of time where we have to wait. So right now I'm operating as a sole proprietor, which means that all of the exposure, all of the risk is on my shoulders. Everything. If Elections Alberta sends me a letter, which they did, I have to respond to it, which I will, and any consequence falls on my shoulders, nobody else. Now, when it comes to the society, yes, we have a board that will function, that will fulfill the role of the board and the society once it's done, but it's not yet a legal entity. So when we talk about Let's Talk Alberta, it's just me and my friends. You can't really get any more grassroots than that. Now, if you want to talk about how we are staying on side with Elections Alberta, Let's Talk Alberta is not a third-party advertiser, nor will we ever be one. I am not interested in doing that. We exist in the carve-out for town halls, political expression, and all of the charter-protected things that are actually included in the election finance rules. We can't advertise for an outcome as an organization, a candidate, a party, any of those things. But what we can do is get people into a room where we have an open forum and share our personal opinions. So that's what we're doing. And yes, I have already received a letter from Elections Alberta alleging that I was advertising for some of those, what do we call them? The nothing burger questions, the 9 referendum questions that are coming in October. But that's not anything we've been doing. So I hope that kind of clears it up. And he can have if he wants to follow up and get me to clarify anything, I'm happy to do it.
I don't know if you'll be able to answer this one here also. Again, once Alberta separates and this province will become very prosperous, how does Alberta transition to an Alberta dollar?
The same way any other nation does. You build a reserve, and then you launch a currency. It's been done like hundreds of times across the globe. It's not something that would likely happen immediately. This is something that would probably take a period of time because you don't just magically build a reserve, right? You have to put some things in savings or stockpile some physical assets or something like that. But what I personally advocate for, and again, this is just a personal opinion, is that we would immediately adopt the US dollar. Why? Because it's semi-stable. It's not going to take the hit that the Canadian dollar will, inevitably, likely. We can use it to trade around the world. It's internationally accepted, those types of things. The United States government allows other nations to use their currency. So it's just an easy fit, especially considering that 90% of our trade is north-south. But when it comes to an Alberta reserve, it is really important to understand what a reserve is. So a reserve is what backs the value of your currency. If you don't have something backing the value of your currency, your currency can be, what would you call it? Attacked, I guess. This happened, that's the Asian financial crisis. That's what happened there. They had their dollars pegged to the US dollar. There was some predatory investments that happened in the multi-billions of dollars, and it deflated their dollar. And these investors they took advantage of the fact they didn't have a reserve. The only one that survived it with their skin on was Hong Kong, because Hong Kong, they have, or had at that time, 104% of their GDP was held in reserve, so their dollar was stable. And that's something that Alberta would have to do too, and it wouldn't happen overnight. Any more online, Bonnie?
You can hang on to it as well.
Okay. I was at a sort of I wouldn't call it a separatist thing, but Danielle was the moderator. It was in Red Deer. It was a full day deal about 7-8 years ago, maybe when Rachel Notley was in. But the two speakers, there was lots of great speakers, but two of them were Chief Billy Morin and another older fellow about my age from Fort Mac. anyways, I thought they were just the token guys there, but they were real interesting. They're First Nations guys, chiefs, and they went on for whatever the segment was. They went on for 40 out of 45 minutes saying how bad they got treated by Ottawa. And then the last 5 minutes, they still want to stay. So I think one of the biggest hurdles for this movement is going to be the First Nations buy-in. And is there any way that you guys know, or you can talk about the strategy? I don't believe that poll that's going around on Instagram or whatever, but is there a way that Alberta could make, or the new Alberta could make a deal with England or whatever to take over so that they would still have their rights to the Queen or King now, and everything could still stay the same? Because this is going to be one of the biggest hurdles, is the First Nations, and they have so much power in the courts, and it's total communism there. The chiefs get all the gravy and the rest of them. Yeah, so if you could, I don't know if Alberta could make a deal with the Crown, I guess is the question.
Sure. So my position on this is First Nations stand to benefit the most from an independent Alberta, for sure. The statistics that they live under are absolutely horrendous. If you go to whistlestoptruckstop.ca/blog, there's a couple there. There's one article, a blog post I did called "Why Treaties Were Meant to Free People," and the other one is "Why First Nations Stand to Benefit Most from an Independent Alberta." The two things that you said they talked about were both true at the same time. They mentioned how they haven't been treated well by the Crown or by Ottawa, and it actually isn't the Crown they haven't been treated well by. It's Ottawa. The Crown's intention, according to what the spirit of the treaties and stuff was back then, was to preserve the people. Like the Queen back then referred to them as the Queen's Indians. Like, these are important people to me, and we want to make sure that they can survive the change that's occurring in their land. That was the spirit. The Indian Act changed everything. It was Ottawa that changed the structure, and all of a sudden those treaties became cages instead of an ability for a people to persevere through a change. Okay, so yes, people, they haven't been treated well by Ottawa, for sure. And I would say that the majority of First Nations people stand to benefit hugely. But it's also true that the chiefs and the leaders who benefit from the status quo don't want anything to change. Why? The two things can be true at the same time, because it's not that they care so much about the hardships that their people face. They care more about the hardships that they don't face. And that's why when we see polls like this, it's probably really accurate that almost 50% of First Nations people want an independent Alberta. When it comes to the treaties, that's between the signatories. I'm not a signatory to the treaty. If they choose to renegotiate or negotiate with Alberta, that is totally, completely up to them. An independent Alberta's responsibility would be to honor the intention of those treaties. Right? You can't just say, oh, we're going to do something different and just ignore you. No. We've done things different in the past. The treaties in Alberta, they were written between 1876 and 1899. Well, during that time, things changed. We confederated. 1867, the treaty survived. 1905, Alberta became a province. We weren't a province before. We were the Northwest Territories. There was a jurisdiction change. The treaties survived. The territory survived, even though there was these imaginary lines drawn as borders. Then in 1931, the Land and Resource Transfer Act, the treaties survived, even though the jurisdiction of the land and resources moved from the Crown to the province. And in 1982, the Constitution was repatriated. The treaties survived. It stands to reason that because they survived those things, they could survive a jurisdiction change from the federal government to Alberta as well. And then it becomes the choice of the signatories whether they want to continue with the status quo or join us in the most free, prosperous place on the planet where nobody gets left behind.
Just a little on that poll that was done by Act Now for Alberta, which is tied to Rebel Media. Actually, I was talking this morning with Sheila Gunn-Reid on her show about that, and they commissioned a 3,000 person poll on that one, and they used Main Street polling, so it wasn't some little outfit or anything. They spent a pile on it. They weren't looking for that result. They were actually quite shocked when it came in. They were as surprised as anybody to see that. It could be an anomaly, but it was a really big sampling. So I think there might be, if people can reach the Indigenous people on the ground. That's the hard part. Some familiar with me, I've been charged with trespassing just for shooting video on the Siksika Reserve. So it's tough to get to the people on the ground, but they are discontent. And if something's being offered that could change the status quo for them, I think that's why we might see some saying, yes, I would vote for it, just because they'd vote for anything if it'll change the mess they're in currently. So I think there's more to be examined and a heck of a lot more to be thought about. But that surprising outcome might be an outlier, but I think it's a sign that maybe there's something more there that we could foster if we could just reach people.
Not a question, but a comment. Kevin says, Chris or Jessica, let me know if you need more challenge coins. I'll do my best to get some to you. Folks here might remember that he had some beautiful Independence Challenge coins at the May 2nd fundraiser. So I thought I'd give him a shout out, and maybe, I don't know, maybe Kevin, you can put a link in the comment thread.
I think there's a question over there.
Thanks. So earlier you mentioned that if we would adopt the US dollar, we would have to get a reserve fund to back it up at one point.
No.
So, but I have my question is there any truth to the fact that the US would consider lending Alberta $500 billion to ensure that we would be able to deal with the onslaught of the initial separation?
So for the first part of that, sorry, I'll clarify. I didn't mean that we would have to build a reserve to have a U.S. currency. The U.S. has their own reserve, and that's that. So we wouldn't need it for that. The reserve would be specifically for an Alberta dollar, not for the U.S. dollar. Your question about the alleged $500 billion loan, that was apparently something that was discussed with some low-level people in Washington, with some folks that are within the Alberta Prosperity Project. And it was more like a passing conversation, a what if, would this be something that would be available? And I think the response was they didn't say no. So no, there's no formal loan, nothing like that. It couldn't be negotiated until Alberta was a sovereign nation anyhow. But I think it's just people spitballing about what the future could look like, but it carries no legislative weight or authority.
And if it were to happen, it's not so much a loan as a line of credit if it was needed to draw upon. But also, just to add to that, like, we have a lot of strength in negotiation. So for instance, for many years, for 8 years or so, 6, 8 years, I lived up in Cold Lake. I was manager of Lafarge, so I was on Four Wing just about every day. I had fully unrestricted area pass to it all. That was all built right after the World War II when the Cold War started, and it was pretty much all built by the US. So you have the Air Force Base and the runways and everything else in Cold Lake. Then if you go a little bit further north, you have the Primrose bombing range. It's called CLAR, Cold Lake Air Weapons Range. Massive bombing range, and it is the most coveted piece of bombing range in the world because it most closely simulates Russia. And not only that, it doesn't have a hard ceiling. Like you train in the US or in Europe, there's a hard ceiling because of population density. They're not supposed to break like 10,000 feet. Well, in Cold Lake, from mid-May till the end of June, for 6 weeks every year, they have what is called Maple Flag. And it is where all the NATO nations, the best of the best of the best pilots, come and train. And it is an impressive sight to see. So we have this gem of an asset. And all of that land is Alberta's. It's just on lease to the Department of National Defence of Canada. So when we separate, and right now, I think it's really important to realize that we're living in Canada where we have Chinese military boots on the ground. We have Chinese police stations. We have massive companies that have been bought by Chinese holdings with Chinese employees. Do you think that that's not something that is catching the attention of the US? So our ability to negotiate on these things and to have the US not take us over as the 51st state, because I'd love to talk to that topic if anybody has a question about the 51st state, but they would love to enter into a protectorate agreement with us to help us out with all of that, because we are key to keeping the Western Hemisphere free.
No. Yep. Okay. Not about the 51st state. Now, I read some stuff on the weekend on the APP site. I got it. Oh, you're supposed to. Okay. Oh, I'm not going to fling it at anyone. Anyway, and you just mentioned this. So on the APP site, there was some stuff about how would Alberta proceed when we become independent. And I'm no political expert. I leave that up to you folks. One of my customers said to me one day, and he talked about Puerto Rico. Well, okay, I've heard of Puerto Rico, and I always thought they seemed like they kind of got an American flair to them. You see them come into the Olympics with the flag and everything, and there's some stars and stripes. When my customer explained it to me, how Puerto Rico works, and he said, I think this could also work for our independent Alberta. And I said, hey, you're a smarter guy than me when it comes to this. Is it something, and I know we got a lot of work to do before we get to that point, is that still something that could be considered? Because to me, it's sort of like baby steps towards full independence. Like when we raise our children, we don't just stick them out there. You know, it takes 16 to 18 years, and then hopefully they stay out, but they might rebound once or twice, but eventually they get it. So thank you.
Well, to me, actually, the better example that appeals to me, and once again, this is just our opinions. Yep. I actually like the situation that Costa Rica has better. Because what Costa Rica has, they have their own borders, they have their own passports, they have their own currency, they have their own flag, they have their own government. They signed a protectorate agreement with the US decades ago, back when everybody was worried about communism and everything else, where they said, we're not even going to have a standing army, but if anybody touches us, it's like touching the eyeball of the US. As long as we stay within a republic democracy type of government that is legitimate, so they don't even have a standing army. If you've ever been there, they have very good policing, they have an incredible healthcare system, and they have a fantastic schooling system. You go to school there in high school, you get to pick the 2 languages besides Spanish that you want. So you can get German, French. You know, you have a whole plethora of options because they don't have a standing army. But nobody's going to mess with them, because if they do, they immediately mess with the US. Now, I'm not saying that's what we would have. I'm just saying that there are options on the table, and we certainly have a larger negotiating card than Costa Rica or Puerto Rico ever had. So there are some amazing options for us. Can you imagine the billions that the US, right now the US has 100,000 troops in Europe, and they spend $60 to $80 billion a year there, driving their economies. The US would do the same type of thing with us, and think of the prosperity that would bring to us.
Hi there. Excuse me, I got a bad throat. There's something we can all be proud of in here, and I work a lot in BC, and right now people are dividing up BC to follow us, and they're following what we're doing here. My question here is, what sort of activities are we doing, or how are we organized where we all work together? The Let's Talk people, you know, you guys, Alberta Prosperity Project, all these people. How are we coordinating with everybody?
Well, I can say we're all going in the same direction, but we're not colluding, if that makes sense. We each have our individual roles to play. And I believe that even though there's a couple organizations doing this type of work right now, we probably even need a little bit more. And there's many reasons for that. The biggest reason is if something happens with one, like would you want to have all your eggs in one basket and then have that organization somehow falter or fail and be left with nothing? Well, no, that would be terrible, right? The other thing is sometimes there are the 5% of things that conservatives disagree on that they can't get past. And it doesn't have to be something we fight amongst each other about. If there's an irreconcilable thing, you just each do your own thing and we're going to the same place. And that's okay. That's part of the idea of talking about things is we have to be willing to hear that we're not going to agree on something. We're not going to be unified, but we can have a united goal, which is an independent Alberta, right? So I believe that it's necessary to have a few distinct organizations, maybe slightly different in their application, but all going to the same place. It's like India, 1946, right? No, they didn't ask, hey, everyone has to be Christian, or everyone has to be atheist, or everyone has to be Muslim, and then we're going to gain our independence. It was, no, we have things that we fundamentally disagree on, but we all want to be free, and we're going to work together for that end. And they did, and they won. Same kind of thing. Okay, so the question was, what about the 51st state? And I can hear Zayn salivating over here, so I'm going to let him take that one.
Well, it's a legitimate question, and I've heard it 1,000 times, probably more. The reason it won't work is this, because number one, we could never, ever, under any scenario, be the 51st state. The best we could be is the 53rd state. And it's been decades since the 50th state was made. In fact, I was going to look that up and I forgot, but it's been decades, right? There's been 50 states for a coon's age. The reason why we can't be the 51st is there are, as you mentioned, 2 territories, districts ahead of us. Washington, D.C. would be the 51st. Puerto Rico would be the 52nd. Then it would be us as the 53rd. And the reason that's never going to happen is if you've got the Republicans in office and they agree now to make Washington, D.C. the 51st state and Puerto Rico the 52nd state, well, guess what? Those are Democratic states. So Washington, with the Republicans in, is never going to agree with that. So let's say the Democrats get in and they push it through and they get 2 blue states. Do you think that Alberta is going to sign up under a Biden or a Kamala? No. So there's just not a chance really of us becoming the 51st state. But I tell you what, we hold so many advantages in negotiating with the U.S. to have everything we want. Like, this is really a situation where we have the cake and we get to eat it too.
It was Hawaii in 1959.
Hawaii in 1959.
Thank you. Welcome. See, we all learn something every time we do one of these.
First of all, Chris, did we ask the question of the audience? The question?
No, do you want to ask?
Sure. Hands up, please. How many of you have not attended an independence event before? Anybody here? 2, 3, 4. That's not too bad.
Oh, there's a few, yeah.
Not too bad. Thank you for coming tonight. I have two questions. Online folks, don't be offended if your question doesn't get chosen because we can't answer all of them. One is
Hold on, Bonnie, just 1 second on that note.
What?
I did something really fun over the last few days and I stayed up really late to do it. So Let's Talk Alberta actually built an independence chatbot. You can go to letstalkalberta.com and you can ask any of these questions and it's going to very likely give you a very similar answer that I would give you. Why? Because I trained it with all of the stuff I've learned, all of the stuff I've written, all of the events that we've done. All of those are accessed by that chatbot. So if you go to Let's Talk Alberta and you type in, what about First Nations? It's going to tell you what I think, what my opinion is. And it's going to give you citations and backup where you can look at the things online to back it up. And of course, full disclosure, it's a robot. It's not a human. It can make mistakes. And if you have questions that you feel aren't answered effectively, get a hold of Chris at letstalkalberta.com and it'll go to someone to be answered.
Very good. So since I'm holding the mic, I have two questions and there's four of you, so that's okay. I'm sure you can do that. There's a viewer who just tuned in. He didn't hear what you were saying earlier about the treaties. He said, I'm Blackfoot from Siksika. I just started watching a few minutes ago. I live on reserve. Can you give me one specific example of how I will benefit from Alberta independence? The second question is, how would Alberta defend itself on three sides, and how long would it take to put that into action?
So the first question about how would an independent Alberta benefit somebody that lives on a reserve right now, right? Okay, so here's just off the top of my head. If we stop hemorrhaging $30 billion a year as Alberta to the federal government, for which we don't get any money or services back, we can improve our services substantially. Our services aren't, they're not administered based on your ancestry or skin color. They're administered because you're an Albertan. So if we have $30 billion more to provide services to Albertans, that's a really, really big deal, considering our entire public health budget is $22 or $23 billion, right? That's one example. You know, and like I said before, independence doesn't necessarily change anything on reserve if the signatories of the treaties choose to remain in that relationship, but it opens the door for them not to. So what if the signatories, what if the First Nations people decided, hey, we don't want to be caged in reserves anymore that are owned by the federal government. We would like to own property and be able to use it as collateral to start businesses. You know, the sky is literally the limit for First Nations people. And the second one about our borders, how do we defend it?
Yeah, how do you defend it and how long would it take to set that up?
Probably do it within a couple months. But the big question is, who do people think we're defending from? Canada? Yeah. Really? I mean, the idea that a nation like Canada that rarely engages in active conflict, they're mostly peacekeeping roles, although Canada does show up when it needs to. The idea that it would attack or invade a freshly sovereign independent nation that became so through the democratic will of the people is ludicrous. I can't believe that would happen. But if you want to know how I think we would create a military, we would cut a check for the United States, 4% of our GDP, according to the NATO obligations or more, and they would be happy to supply us with defense. They do it for lots of other countries. There's actually 3 countries around the world, and I can't remember which ones they are right now. Their primary defense services is provided by the United States. And there's another 24 or so that have supplementary forces. So that could be all done in a period of months or possibly even weeks, right?
And there's one fact I always liked is, I think it's kind of humorous in a sad, sad way. Considering after World War II, we had like the 3rd or 4th largest Navy in the world. We were noted all over Europe as being some of the finest fighters in the world. Right now, there are just over 60,000 members in the Canadian all forces combined military. And we're talking mechanics, clerks, cooks, fighters, Air Force, everything. There are over 75,000 registered real estate agents in the Greater Toronto area. So do you think that they are able to come and attack us? Like, first of all, what Chris said is 100% accurate. But the other fact is, too, you know, our poor military, this is how much it suffered. Just about 2 weeks ago, Carney announced that he was giving $40 million to, I believe it was Lebanon, and $120 million to Sudan. It was either Sudan or Somalia, but I believe it was Sudan. And in the very same week, he announced that all deployed members in the Canadian military would have their away from home pay of $2,500 a month reduced immediately by $1,000. He gave $160 million away to Lebanon and Sudan, but all of our deployed members were immediately, so they didn't have time to change their rent agreements, bunk with someone else, immediately, effective immediately, $1,000. They were only getting $2,500 a month for living in a foreign country, you know, representing our country. he took them down to 1,500. Do you think that we couldn't get a better military here, a more respected military?
Yeah, they'd want to be here.
Just a quick question. I think you had talked before about advertising on billboards and along the highway. And obviously that costs quite a bit of money. I just thought it would look good if you had a forklift loading semis of cash heading to Ottawa, because a lot of people don't believe you, like you said earlier, that the equalization payments are that crazy.
Yeah, I actually like that. So basically Tanya's speech in a graphic form, right? Yeah, that'd be fantastic. The advertising is a little bit tricky. So as an organization, Let's Talk Alberta, we can advertise town halls. We can advertise for Let's Talk Alberta, but we have to be very, very careful that we're not advocating or we're not advertising for something that is out of our scope, out of the carve-out for expression and town halls. But during this unique period that we're in right now, we can advertise anything we want because there is no writ. There's no, there's no order in council. So those rules don't apply. So if there's anyone out there that wants to backstop or fund these things, please come see me and we will put up the most visually representing ads possible to show the amount of money that leaves Alberta every year.
I was thinking about when Jeff Rath said some stuff and John Bolton said some stuff. And is there a timeline that you're looking at as far as, there's different factions, bringing them all together? Like, are you talking to other people? I mean, Let's Talk Alberta is one. And, so does it all go up to APP?
No, we are distinctly separate from APP and take no governance or grant money or anything from them. Was that the crux of the question, or was there more?
No, not really.
Okay.
Okay, so what I'm talking about in Corey, he gets what I'm saying. You've got all these, everybody the same attitude, but you got a bunch of different groups. And is there some conversations going on now, planning about, okay, what, we've got this style of door-to-door campaigning that we want to do, and talk to another group and okay, we'll do the same thing. We'll take this area, you guys take that area, and that way you can cover more area.
No, we don't have any plans to do that, and there's a very good reason for it. Like I said before, the consequence of anything that Let's Talk Alberta does rests squarely on my shoulders. So I'm not going to expose myself to the activities that others are doing. We're going in the same place, and of course we may have conversations from time to time, but we're not going to, I guess the word is collude like that. If one organization has a misstep or fails or something like that, I don't want to be, we need to go the same place but do it on our own terms. Like, imagine if everybody had united under the recent group that found themselves in trouble with Elections Alberta. Well, we would all be in a world of hurt. It's better to stay in our own lanes working towards the same goals.
If Tanya remembers, could she tell us about the CCAN and all the billions of dollars that go to Ottawa?
So generally speaking, we oversend $28 billion to Ottawa that we don't get anything back in terms of services. And if you average that out by the population of Alberta, that's about $6,000 per Albertan. It's not that you pay it exactly directly, but that's what the average would be, that we're losing $6,000 in services per Albertan. So if you counted that out in $20 bills, that's $320 bills, it would fill 56 semi-truck trailers, like cargo containers, of $20 bills from Albertans. And then when those 56 trailers take off, because each 2 of those trailers is $1 billion, that's how you get your 28 billion. Half of those would go directly to Quebec, because 14 billion goes there in equalization payments. Was that for Leonard?
Really good. That's really good.
Happy days.
I have a couple of questions. So I have a question for Tanya. At previous town halls, panel members said that if Alberta became independent, many more people would move here because Alberta would become more prosperous. If that happened, wouldn't increased demand push housing prices, property taxes, insurance costs, and overall cost of living even higher?
Yeah, and I think the idea is that would have to put on a little bit of an immigration freeze initially, because we need some time to catch up to the lack of infrastructure that we currently have from the mass immigration that we've had. And then also, I'm sure there'll be proposals put forward for what our immigration policy would look like, but it might go back to something that Canada originally had, where you have to have like a real pride of being an Albertan, and you have to have some real incentive and something that you're bringing to this province so that we really make it somewhere that people want to be, and you should be very proud to be a part of it. So there might be a point system where if you can speak the language, if you have a skill, if you're educated, all of those different things would be part of the immigration, not just an open border policy, but something that's actually going to bring something to Alberta and make you proud to be an Alberta and be collectively here. Does that answer it?
I'll just add just a touch about the temporary foreign workers. Danielle Smith, if anybody saw it last week, came up on the podium, said that she'd had her departments dig into the numbers in 2024 regarding the temporary foreign workers. So in 2024, temporary foreign workers did over 35,000 doctor and hospital visits that cost Albertans over $400 million, okay? 45,450, I believe it was, students were in public schools, and that cost Albertans $600 million. On top of that, there was over $100 million spent for daycare, for other social programs. So we're over $1 billion for temporary foreign workers in 2024, and they generated $150 million in revenue. So if we cleaned up that immigration, if we started to look after our borders and made sure that those who are coming here were bringing value, it would take a massive burden off of housing, off of infrastructure, off of transportation, off of schools, off of hospitals, all of that. When she made that statement, that was mind-boggling. And that's just temporary foreign workers. That's not refugees or anything else. Refugees, on average in Canada, get $82,000 a year between direct money, housing, and benefits. $82,000 a year.
I have a question now for Corey.
I didn't do it.
So I wasn't, but this is the questioner was. I was born in the former Yugoslavia and came to Canada when I was 5 years old. I grew up in Ontario, worked my whole life in Canada, and now I've lived in Alberta for almost 5 years. If Alberta became independent, would people like me be considered full citizens of Alberta? And what would define that citizenship?
Yeah, I mean, there's some people, I think a few people uncomfortable saying we want to start mass deportations the second we become independent. That's irresponsible, inflammatory, and really could harm a lot of people who are here contributing and doing a very good job. I mean, immigration is good for us when we control it and do it right. Somebody who's a permanent resident with a good history, who's working, who's already paying taxes, I could see them quickly, if not immediately, becoming just full Alberta citizens. That's what we want. We need a system, though, as has been reiterated over and over again, where we have points, where we know who is contributing, who's going to settle, who's going to become a better Albertan. And there's many of them right now who are permanent residents but are not citizens. Let's not talk about pushing anybody out like that. These are good citizens of the province who will continue to contribute from all over the world. So it's a good question, and it's kind of what we got to watch with a little bit of our own discourse too, because we could sound a little bit reactionary when we have problems with temporary foreign workers and other things that we do want to move on, but there's also a lot of people here who haven't gotten full citizenship yet who would continue to be really good Albertans, and I think we would welcome them quite easily.
I have another question. This one I think is for Zayn. What would happen to existing RDSPs? That's a registered disability savings plan for those that don't know. Or this could apply to RESPs and registered education plans and all sorts of things. Would people still be able to contribute to their RDSPs and continue receiving the unused federal grants and bonds? If not, would Alberta replace those lost grants with its own program?
Well, first of all, Alberta is the economic engine to a great degree of all of Canada. I think Tanya mentioned this earlier. You know, the NEP program came in. Why? Well, because all the oil companies relocated to here from Toronto because they realized this is where it was happening. And so that was terrifying Ottawa because that whole economic center was coming here. And then the crux of it, the straw that broke the camel's back, was when CIBC relocated their headquarters to Calgary. And about a week later is when Trudeau gutted us with the NEP. So we are a massive economic force. All of these things that people get worried about banking, about mutual funds, about RSPs, other investments, these banks are going to deal with us. We're not going to lose that. There probably will be the opportunity in the future for more Alberta financial institutions, more Alberta backing, et cetera, et cetera. But all of these things that we have in place, like, for instance, do you know what the largest bank is in the US? It's the TD. Do you know what the largest bank is in Central America and South America? It's the Bank of Nova Scotia. In the UK, it's in Europe, it's the Royal Bank of Canada. So they deal all over the world. They're not going to pull out or affect anything that we're doing here. So we're actually going to be in a situation where, because of our GDP and our GDP per capita will be one of the strongest in the world, our investments, our assets will be more secure than ever. Lost grants, I can't necessarily talk to. So Corey might be able to, but I think that it will be very safe to say that the number one policy of our new country and our new government will be to leave no one behind. I mean, when you look at the fact, like I mentioned earlier, that with the transfer payments we do to Quebec, all those children, all young adults, older adults that go to trade schools, you know, they're paid their full wage through those schools. Why? Because we're sending the 13 or 14 billion a year over there. Those university students who are Quebecois, I mean, they pay a few $100s in tuition. Our students here pay tens of thousands. So we will now be able to be sure that our investments, our grants, whatever, if there is any hassle from Ottawa, that we should easily be able to pick up that slack and leave no one behind.
And this is something that we'd have to decide as Albertans, but I've said this before, I'll say it again, I will advocate to the best of my ability to not leave anyone behind. That goes for old age security or, you know, or AISH or anything that people depend on right now that's either funded or subsidized by the federal government. Alberta would have to pick that up. It's not even a question, and I would fight for that in whatever capacity I could.
While we're kind of on that topic, the Canadian pension plan is something that's always thrown in our face to scare our senior citizens away from voting for separation. There's a few things that we need to clarify on that. Number one, I have literally hundreds of friends who are expats, live all over the world, and they get their pension. It can't be taken away. You don't have to live here. It can't be taken away. Your Canadian citizenship is not going to be taken away. Your Canadian passport will not be taken away. Look at Carney. Carney has at least 3 or 4 passports, right? His family lives in the U.S. His kids live in the U.S. His wife lives in the U.S. 91% of his holdings are in the U.S., but here he is, Prime Minister of Canada. And the other thing about the Canadian pension plan that's very interesting, I'm sure everybody knows this, but I just love saying it. When it came to fruition, Ontario thought that they were the economic dynamo of Canada. And before they would sign on to it, they said, listen, because they were scared they were going to get stuck with the bill. They go, there has to be a clause in there that says that any province can exit the plan at any point in time as long as they, and I can't remember if it's in 1 or 2 years, have the ability to put forward a competitive plan that meets or exceeds for their citizens, their residents, the CPP. And not only that, if they have overpaid into it, they get their overpayment refunded back and accrued interest. Well, guess who paid the bill? Alberta. So we have overpaid over $330 billion. With accrued interest, it'd be over $400 billion. So that's a huge negotiating thing for us. And the other thing right now today, because we have such a high median income in Alberta and we have a youthful workforce, we pay about $9 billion a year into CPP and only take out $6 billion. Now, do you know who didn't sign on to that? Quebec. So Quebec right now has a reserve fund of about $500 billion to service the 2.2 million individuals who are Quebec pension claimers. Take CPP. We have a reserve fund of about $700 billion, but we're paying out to 6.6 million people. So, I mean, when people say that we couldn't run our own pension plan or we're going to lose, like, it's just such a win for our seniors. There's a question, Brad.
Just use the mic if you don't mind. It's got a little wireless one for the live stream.
And I'm so deaf.
So my girlfriends work for Air Canada. They have a pension plan. They wouldn't sign my sheet, and because they said they would lose their Air Canada pension. I said that I didn't think they would, but I didn't know anything about it. I don't know.
If you work for a company that threatens to take away something that you actually paid for, that's a entitlement from your company, because you participate in democracy, you should find another job, or for sure file a grievance with your union. The reality is most pensions have a portability clause. Pensions are not entitlements. They're something that you pay into. You have purchased that. It's your money. It's not Air Canada's money. So I don't understand why people would think they'd lose it, except for the massive fear propaganda campaign that's been imposed on us by the legacy media, right? We've all seen it. Lukaszuk standing up saying, oh, we got to protect Canada, not let Alberta leave because you don't want to lose your pension, do you, right? That's gaslighting at its finest. And this is why we're doing this, because we need to get people in rooms like this to talk about these issues and get the facts to them. And more importantly, not more importantly, but in addition, I would ask them to dig into the pension fine print and find out if that's the case. That information, it's there, it's accessible, and we can just dispel all these myths with a simple Google search.
And another thing, there's about 48 chiefs in Alberta. This has to do with the natives. Those 48 chiefs, and I know they're not all corrupt, but there is a lot of corrupt ones. They could help their people, but they don't want to because they keep the money that the government gives them to buy themselves new vehicles and fix their houses and give their families some money. So the rest of the reserves get nothing. And one more thing, I was just saying, we had to go through a course to become a canvasser. Did the For Canada have to do that?
I don't know. I don't think so. But I don't know. I know they were allowed to sign up tourists, so there's that. Yeah, there wasn't a verification process as strict or strict at all. And there's people that brag about signing multiple times. I know people personally who signed with fake names. Like it was a complete travesty the way that was done. Yeah, thanks. Good night. Is there, you got a question? Okay.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say when we were canvassing, we signed up 2 people that signed the Forever Canada petition and said that Carney made them, after they signed and Carney did what he did, they had to come and sign for separation. So we were really happy about that.
Yeah, isn't it beautiful how as time goes on, more and more people come over to this side because the situation that we're in, things keep happening to make them realize that it's necessary and it's inevitable. Even people who signed the Forever Canadian petition. Although I do want to point out that the purpose of the Forever Canadian petition, as documented and signed by Thomas Lukasik, was to have a referendum on that question. So it wasn't like people were signing. It's alleged that they were telling people that by signing that piece of paper, they were signing to stay in Canada. But what they were really signing for was a referendum question to be put to the province as to whether or not people wanted to remain in Canada. Isn't that interesting?
And just as a little side point, because I mentioned up there, like, this is do or die. We're being harmed so badly by Ottawa. It's so evident right now. It's undeniable. We have a favorable administration in the US, which is 88.5%, probably even with oil price up now, it's more than 90% of our exports. It's important to remember that we get this referendum question and we vote on it, because all it really takes is 2 things. Because, you know, there's the whole thing that Kenny was up there, I can't, like, oh, you'll never get it through this, you'll never get it through that, the Senate, you know, on and on and on, those slow rolls. There's only 2 things that it takes for a country to become independent, to become an independent state. It takes a majority vote, and we did hear in the House of Commons that they said it was 50% plus 1. That's on record. And the other thing it takes is the endorsement of 2 other recognized nations. And we already have confirmation from multiple nations that they would recognize us. So that is all it takes. But now how do we get there? Because someone mentioned, you know, there's not a lot of young people in here. There's a lot of people that are on the fence. There's a lot of people that are nervous. I try to bring it up in conversation all the time. And when I get opposition, it's usually not with facts. It's more with nostalgia and emotion. So what I always ask people, I go, okay, fair enough. Name me one thing, just one specific thing that Canada has done for Alberta, not for all of the provinces and territories, just for Alberta. One thing, and I've never had an answer to that. And they'll say, but you know, I can name at least 700 billion things that Alberta has done for the rest of Canada. You know, we've transferred money, we've overpaid in income tax, we've overpaid in CPP, we've overpaid in EI deductions, we've overpaid in transfer payments. It's built roads, hospitals, airports, schools for the rest of Canada. Name me one thing. And I've never had an answer to that. And all that does, you don't need to be confrontational, we don't need to fight, it can plant a seed of thought.
I have another question for either of you. If Alberta adopted the US dollar or created a new Alberta currency, and the Canadian dollar dropped significantly as some panel members predict, what protections would exist for Albertans like me whose pensions would still be paid in Canadian dollars?
We can't guarantee protections. I wish I could. But I mean, if there's going to be a drop in that currency and the funds that are coming to you are in a Canadian currency, you're going to take a hit. So I'd suggest, when possible, and I know that's difficult with people with fixed income and they're relying on that, perhaps start trying to move away from things that are tied directly to just Canadian currency. Things will float, though. You got to understand, when inflation happens, if the Canadian dollar takes a dump, and even though we've become separate, and people are getting pension payments or some other entitlements still, say from the other nation of Canada coming in, it's in Canadian dollars. Well, as the Canadian currency drops, they will increase the amount of payouts in dollars anyways that go to people to try and compensate for that. So you would get $1,000 Canadian versus 500 on something, but the purchasing power of that would be lower. Like it's, I don't know. This is a long discussion you could go on, but I mean, we can't promise these things aren't going to happen. The dollar isn't going to completely collapse, but it will drop. Get the hell out of the dollar.
And what would happen on day one is we wouldn't have any federal income taxes. So you're going to have an increase in your take-home pay all of a sudden. Plus, the cost of our goods and services, your dollar is going to go further in Canada because we're not going to have all those hidden federal taxes, all the carbon tax, all the crap that's woven into everything. So you're going to have more purchasing power and a bigger income coming home. So if there's a time where it's a little bit rocky in a transition period, you're going to be able to withstand that easier.
Let me shift this from what we don't know to what we know. So I can't tell you with any degree of certainty if there would be specific protections offered by the Alberta government that would top up pensions to match what the buying power of before. What I can tell you is that in the last 15 years in Canada, your dollar has dropped by almost 50%. And there's not a damn thing any one of us have ever been able to do about it. We've never been able to effectively influence federal monetary policy. We've never been able to advocate for not doubling our money supply, thereby cutting its value by half. We've never been able to stop the billions upon billions of dollars hemorrhaging out of the country, going to other nations to fund wars that we have nothing to do with. So what I know is that the Canadian dollar has suffered, and we've been along for the ride. What I don't know is less important than what I know in this case, because in an independent Alberta, we would have the first, for the first time in history, we would be steering that ship. We could make those decisions rather than suffer the consequences of what somebody that we can't affect their legislative policy does. And I think that's pretty much it, unless there's any other pressing questions that we've missed. I know someone earlier said they were going to stump me.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, thank you all for coming out.
Do they need help putting up chairs or anything? I'm not sure.
Does anyone know if we need, are we putting chairs away and stuff, or is that, okay. So if you folks don't mind, if you can give us a hand putting some of the tables and chairs away, that would be great. But I also want to mention, Carrie, oh yeah, we're going to invite Leonard up in just a moment. But I want to say, if there's any questions we didn't get to, try that chat bot and let me know. Like, send me an email at chris@letstalkalberta.com. Let me know how it worked. If your question was answered effectively, I'm really curious. And if it didn't, we'll just keep working on it so that we can get all these questions answered 24/7, right from now until whenever. And Leonard, if you want to, yeah.
One more pierogi container to go.
Good evening. For those of you that don't know me, it's Leonard Biscop here. I worked with many of you with the Alberta Prosperity Project and with Stay Free Alberta. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming out. And I'd like everybody here to thank the volunteers that came out, did the setup. And for our speakers that came out tonight, it's a huge personal cost to all of them, even in spite of some of the costs being covered by donations. So give them all a round of applause, please. Another thing I'd like to touch on, I just received an email from Alberta's Prosperity Project. And Mitch has instructed Jeff Rath to file an appeal on today's judicial decision. So that's going to be coming. He's also working on doing a rally. So as that becomes firmed up, I'll be trying to arrange buses, so anybody interested in that, please drop me a line. You have my email. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody again and thank our speakers and all of our volunteers for coming out. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. That's a wrap. Well, thank you everybody for watching, and thank you for your questions. I just want to make sure that if you didn't hear it before, you can hear it now. Right up here, there's a QR code. That takes you to the Let's Talk Alberta website, and you can try out our brand new shiny chatbot, trained on all things Alberta independence. If you have a question that didn't get answered, you can just put it in as a message, hit enter, and it will give you, very close to what my response would be, because it's trained on some of my writing and some of my peers as well. And again, if you want to support the conversation, you can do so by sending an e-transfer to letstalkalberta@gmail.com, or you can use the donate button on the website. And again, you know what? If you don't trust me to do the right thing with your hard-earned money and advance the conversation around independence, don't donate. If you do, please donate, and donate often. We're sure going to need the help. Good night.
Thank you.